Amazing. So welcome everybody to Nova Scribes. This is, we're going to be doing, Rachel, what are we doing? Facilitating decision-making and consensus building. You want to tell folks about where this came from? This was kind of cool.
Yeah, so I've been doing some consulting with a government contracting company called Kobeck Consulting, which a lot of the Nova Scribes events have used the space because they're cool like that. And one of the workshops that we did, some virtual workshops, and one of them we decided to do was this one. So Brian and I put it together and delivered it. And we're like, I think a lot of people would like this. So we are doing it here as well.
Yeah. Well, like, so this was cool. So let's try it. So let's actually get you in here. And what I mean by that is that we're going to be using Google Docs for this one. And so I'm dropping a link into chat. And for the recording, I'm also going to be sharing my screen, but don't let my shared screen distract you. Okay. Oh, before we go any further, again, Rachel and I are going to be instructing. We also have Henry Chamberlain, graphic recording. Henry, how long have you been a graphic recorder?
Practice. So let's say 2 years.
Awesome.
Possibly 2 years.
So it's great to have Henry doing the graphic recording for us. So a little bit of a welcome and a kickoff. And by the way, if you want to, at any point up at the top of the screen where you see all those anonymous animals, if you see my icon, my avatar, if you click on that, that will take you to where I am in the document. You can also take a look at my screen to see where I'm at. Okay. So our goals for today is that we're here to learn how to facilitate collaborative decision-making and consensus building frameworks. And so this graphic, I show this one every single time I talk to a client for the first time. I ask them, what kind of meeting is this? Is this a tell where it's more directive or informative? Is it a sell where we're trying to be more persuasive? Is it a consult where we're looking for advice and feedback? Or is it a co-create where equals are coming in to generate ideas, decide against those ideas, and actually carry out the decisions against those ideas? So we are at the co-create level. We are talking about a group decision-making process, a participatory decision-making process, where individuals come in and they share in the responsibility of idea generation and decision-making. If you are thinking about the kind of meeting where all you got to do is share a PowerPoint and call it a success, this is not that kind of meeting. That's not what we're talking about here. This is really about a group decision-making process. So how are we going to get there? So we're going to do a welcome. This is the meeting startup. We're going to kick off with an energizer using a tool called PathSpace, which I know Heather is really familiar with. And then we're going to share a framework that you can use to think about these different decision-making modalities along opening to new ideas, drawing out information, refining those ideas, and then closing on those ideas. Okay. And then we'll close. So a couple of agreements, please be prepared to participate. Rachel and I will also keep our eye on chat. So if you've got any questions, you can ask a question in chat, or you can make a comment like, wow, this Google Doc is epic. Thank you, Heather. You can also, we'll also keep an eye on the participant window. And so if you take yourself off mute, we'll see it and we'll assume that you've got something that you want to share. Okay. If you want to make comments, like for example, on PathSpace, you can do that in chat without interrupting, the flow of the conversation. And again, keep yourself on mute unless you want to talk. If you can, keep your webcams on if your background and bandwidth allow. And then finally, make requests. So what else? Is there anything else that you'd like to make a request for tonight before we jump into it? You can go off mute. Let us know. Rachel?
I have a request. I would like people to put in the chat what room they're in, and then I'm totally stealing this from Priya Parker. What room you're in, and also a noise you are hearing around yourself.
Ooh. Nice intro, Rachel. I'm gonna have to remember that one. So a couple of roles. So our job, Rachel's and mine, is to manage the process, share the knowledge that we've got, and encourage participation. Your job as participants is to contribute to the group discussion and agreements, and please to ask some questions. Okay. So we're going to kick off with principles for facilitating decision-making and consensus. And to give us a bit of a framework, I want to do what we call a chart talk, which is where one person tries to talk and draw at the same time. So let me switch my screen around. We'll see if I can get this to work.
And then we'll do the PathSpace.
I'm sorry?
And then we'll do the PathSpace.
Oh yeah, let's do the PathSpace first. Good idea. Way to keep me on. All right. So
in the Google Doc, you'll see a link for PathSpace. It'll take you to a browser window.
I'll drop it into Zoom chat too.
Thank you. where you will see the question. The question is, what should we eat?
Right. So let's assume that we're all have to decide where we're going to go have dinner tonight. It's about 4:40 on the East Coast right now. We're going to collaboratively decide where we're going to go eat. Now, the more ideas, the better. Okay. So you can do genres of food. Is that the right word? Cuisines. You can do specific restaurants, specific meals, specific kinds of foods, whatever you want. But let's collaboratively decide where we're going to go have dinner. Now, if you have enough ideas in there, if you've got like beyond 3 ideas, you should see this button light up that says generate AI suggestions. And if you click that, it'll get an idea for the kind of stuff that you're looking for. And if you like any of those ideas, you can add them. Okay. If you've only shared 1 idea, try to push past that. Let's give me like 1, 2, 3, 4 ideas. That'll be good. Okay. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on. All right, so take a look at this just for a second. So our goal here is just to draw out information. And what I mean by that is if there's anything on here that you don't know what it is, go ahead and ask the question. So go off mute, say, hey, I don't know what a taco is, whatever that might be, right? Go ahead and ask the question. And if you hear somebody asking about, of course, your idea, speak up and give us a little bit of context there. So is there anything on here you don't know what it is? Like, I don't know what Godfathers is. I thought that was a movie.
It is, and it's also a pizza place.
It's a pizza place. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks, Walter.
Mhm.
Anybody else need a little context?
Yeah, what is fogo de chao?
Fogo de chao.
Fogo de chao is a Brazilian steak restaurant. The chao is definitely not spelled that way, but it's a Brazilian steak restaurant.
Mm,
Is that where they come through and like cut the food for you?
It's like a buffet. You go out and eat.
wow.
Crazy.
Anything else on here? Somebody says, I don't care.
Amanda, I see your hand up.
What is pad thai? Pad thai.
Pad Thai
Oh.
is Thai food. It's like noodles with eggs and tamarind and some scrambled eggs in there and sometimes shrimp. And yeah, it's heaven.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christine.
Mhm.
So Amanda, how well does that answer your question?
I had a good visual because she was Christine was describing it for me, and I was seeing the noodles and everything going inside.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Nicola, what's coming up?
I want to know how someone drinks a drink that is the size of a small child. It sounds extraordinarily large. I want to know the logistics of this.
That's a good question. So if that was yours, give us a little context.
That was one of the AI generated ones, and I just thought that was funny, so I put it out there.
Thank you, Kimberly. Christine, I notice you're off mute. Did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Somebody wrote sweet potato, and I've got a question about that. Is that the name of a restaurant, or you like literally want us all to eat a sweet potato? What's
I literally want you to eat a sweet potato with black beans and salsa.
That's okay. So here's what I can do now. If everybody's looking at the sweet potato one, I can add with black beans and salsa. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to update that. And by the way, I should have been doing a good job of updating these other ideas with those additional details just so that we can capture it. Anything else on here that needs a little bit more explanation? Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So now what we can do is we can group these ideas. Now, I don't typically like the initial categories that are suggested, but if there's anything that's similar, go ahead and group them together. Yeah, exactly like that. Now, here's what I'd suggest. So we've got 2 tacos. Those aren't just similar. Those guys are identical twins. So here's what you can do with identical twins. You can pick up one of them and drop it right on top of the other. It'll say, do you want to merge these? And you say yes. So go ahead and merge the identical twins. Yep. That way they're not going to go away. We'll still hang on to them. And you can actually create other categories as they suggest themselves. Somebody was really excited about tacos. I'm wondering if that was the same person. They just wrote like tacos 9 times. Heather, I saw that. Heather has this fabulous taco. Do they still have that? The taco, whatever it is, the the place where we ate that one time in Durango?
Oh, we have an even better taco place.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, you have to come back.
Okay, there's someplace named V Pizza. What's V Pizza? Is that like,
It's a restaurant. It's a pizza restaurant that has pizza and wings.
okay, cool. So what we know is that there's a difference between pizza and V Pizza, right? So we'll leave those in the same camp. But we won't.
Stephanie, you might refresh your browser. Mine, I just did a refreshing of it and it helped moving things.
Mhm.
What is the place by the lake?
Who's got that one?
That was a AI suggestion and I just always like a water view.
Okay. Now that we've got these mostly categorized, and it doesn't have to be perfect, do you see anything that you disagree with, or do you see anything that maybe doesn't belong there, or is there something that belongs in several places? Any thoughts? Let's kind of scan through this, see if you agree with what with how this lined up.
Well, for me, tacos and pizzas are both fast foods,
Okay.
and there's a fast food category.
Okay, so those might fall under fast food. Let me change the title, so that's fast.
How come Baja Fresh won't move over?
It looks like somebody's working on it, right? If it's got, for me, it's got like the little icon on it.
I tried to drag it and then I lost screen space and now it's frozen. Sorry.
Go ahead and
Man.
try refreshing your browser, see if that'll get it to shake loose. There you go. Baja Fresh just freed itself up. Nice. Christine, did you have a comment?
Nope.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. Dangling on mutes are a thing. Any other suggestions around this, Nicola?
Yeah, there's 2 different kinds of categories. Some of them are like the category is a specific food group, or we have one that's all tacos. But then there is this, what is it? The types of food. And some of these other ones, they seem like some of the ones in types of food could be split into other categories possibly.
Okay, cool. So we could do that. Now, just for the sake of demonstration, we won't, but just we could certainly do that if we were actually facilitating. Now, just to keep us moving on, I'm going to move us along. Now, here's the cool part. So actually, let me reset this a little bit. We're gonna, well, yeah, why not? Okay, so we're gonna do a dot vote, and what I mean by that is that if we were in the room together, we would pass these things out, right? These sticker dots. And so what you would do is you would say, okay, like I really, really, really want to go to Taco Bell. If this sticky note said Taco Bell on it, you could take all 10 of your votes and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's like, okay, Taco Bell. You've got a lot of energy there. But if on the other hand, you wanted to spread the energy out a little bit and say, well, I could go to Taco Bell, I could go to McDonald's, I could go to Wild Wings, then you can apportion your votes out however you want to. Anonymous Lemon knows how this works. They're already done. Okay, so take just a minute and apportion out your 10 votes. Let's see if we can figure out where we're going. Maybe just about another 30 seconds. I should probably point out at this moment that we're not actually going to go to dinner, right? This is just a demonstration. Sometimes I get these, you wouldn't believe it. Sometimes I get these emails. I thought you said we were going to dinner. Okay. Got the anonymous pies hanging on to one vote. Okay, done. And then anonymous cookie. You got 5 votes left. Use them wisely. Three, two, one. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on. Sorry, cookie. Let's see how this stacks up. It looks like in first place, fish tacos on the beach. Yay! Wait, let's do this properly. Okay, fish tacos on the beach. Yay! That's our number 1. Followed by number 2, tacos again. Tacos, tacos, tacos. Right. Third place, Mexican. Okay, there's certainly a theme here. Okay. And then elsewhere, in, in fourth place, someplace with a lot of drinks that are the size of a small child. Very nice. Okay, so thank you for participating in this. What we just did is we walked through the process that we're actually going to dive into in a little bit more detail right now. Rachel, am I forgetting anything before I walk through the framework?
No, we are good to go forward and maybe slightly hungry.
All right, so let's hit that then. Let me share my screen. So here we go. All right, so if you think about a good decision-making process, groups are pretty good at identifying why they come together, right? They start with a question, a challenge statement, problems that they have to solve. And then what they start doing is they start jamming on ideas. They say, well, okay, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? And what about this thing over here? And maybe we should try that. And they start brainstorming, okay? And what usually happens is one of two things, right? Either the leader in the room will say, okay, I've heard all of these ideas and we're going to do this, okay? And what that does is it kind of leaves the people that are out here in the wings saying, well, what the heck? We were jamming on ideas. You know, how come you didn't just tell us you were going to make the decision for us, right? And so it can be a little bit alienating. Now, you can tell people that that's how you're going to make the decision to start with. But if you just spring that on people, it can leave people out of the wings. More often than not, though, what usually happens with meetings is groups start jamming on ideas and they just keep jamming and keep jamming and keep jamming until time runs out. And then you walk away thinking, well, what exactly did we just agree to, right? So what has to happen is some sort of pause where we would identify some decision criteria, okay? So we could say, well, of these ideas, you know, how much is it going to cost us? Do we have the time? Do we have the people? Do we have the resources? You know, have we done this before? Do we have the knowledge to be able to get this done? And so once we've got the criteria, we apply the criteria. We say, okay, well, we're definitely not going to do this idea or this idea or this idea. We will do this idea, but it's got these other ideas that are a part of it, and it's got to come before this other idea. And so we're gonna decide what it is that we're going to do and what we're not going to do. And what that will take us to is our outcome, like that. So you could think of this as opening to new ideas, refining those ideas, and then closing on actions. Okay. So that's a pretty good decision-making process. Now, this is, let me just give credit where credit is due. A lot of these ideas, this comes from Sam Kainer and the Facilitator's Guide to Participatory Decision-Making. So he's got a version of this. Also, Interaction Associates. Long name, let me spell it out. Interaction Associates. So they are the ones that actually have the intellectual property of the book, How to Make Meetings Work, which was written by Doyle and Strauss. I highly recommend the book. It's been around for a long time. And that's the book that first identifies the role of, guess what? The recorder in the room. So arguably, that's where the whole concept of facilitation came from. So this is a very old idea, and this has been around for a while. Now, what we're going to do for the rest of our time together is we're actually going to explore modalities for opening, refining, and closing. But before we get off of this, I want to share a principle that you can bring into meetings that I think is pretty powerful. Not only is this a model for the way that ideas flow through meetings, it's also a model for people. So there are those openers. Those are people that love to jam on ideas and say, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? They love to be in the brainstorming space. And then there are your refiners. These are people that ask really good, tough questions like, well, here's what we did last time. How do we know that we have the right funds to be able to do this? How do we know what success looks like? How are we going to measure this, right? What impact is this gonna make? And then you've got the closers who tend to show up like, just tell me what to do. I don't need to be a part of the sausage making. Just kind of tell me what, just give me the plan. I want to jump to the end, right? So you can actually also use this as a model when you're in the room with folks to say, hey, we're going to spend most of our time over here in the opening space. So if you think of yourself as somebody who likes to refine or close, just know you might need to stretch a little bit. Okay. All right. So let me stop sharing my screen. Any comments about this before we move on? Still doing good? Okie dokie. Let me drop this into the Google Doc so you've got it. Oh, there's one other thing I forgot. Sorry. Let's go back to this just for a second. There's something that's really, really super important, which is that now this is something that Kaner and Interaction Associates don't talk about, but I think it's really important. And that is the idea of setting up a social container, which we like to call framing. Okay. So before you just jump into this decision-making process, to take the time to set up the space properly, to welcome people in, to say what's okay, what's not okay, to introduce things like principles or ground rules or agreements, if you like, to tell people what the outcomes are, to make space for the human connection, to do things like introductions. All of that sits outside of the decision-making process, but you got to do it. Because if you are the kind of person that goes into a meeting and says, okay, everybody knows everybody, we all know why we're here, let's just jump in and get to work, you're asking for trouble, because chances are not everybody knows everybody. Chances are not everybody knows why they're there. Not everybody reads their emails. I certainly don't. So that framing, that setting up of the social container, creating psychological safety, that's the most important thing. And I see a lot of facilitators that actually under index on that. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and go back to the Google Doc. And again, I'm going to share my screen. Don't get distracted by it. So we want to share a couple of principles with you we're going to go through each one of these. We're going to talk about framing. We're going to talk about opening. We're going to talk about refining. We're going to talk about closing. And we're going to give you some tools and modalities for each one of these. So Rachel, I'm wondering if you'd like to talk about the principle of beach ball.
Sure. So, oh my God, the beach ball. Yeah, the beach ball is, if you just imagine a group of people are sitting in a circle and there's a beach ball in the middle, and someone says, that is very clearly a yellow and blue beach ball. So the rest of the room says, nope, I'm sorry, that is not a yellow and blue beach ball. That is a pink and red beach ball. And it's like, really, it's the concept that you can't, people have different perspectives and they're seeing things from a different sides. And if you are aware of that, then you can be aware that maybe what you're seeing is not the complete picture. And that you really need the whole kind of collective diversity of thought to kind of get the full view of the beach ball. Brian, anything to add to that? No, thank you. That was a great job. And again, what we want to do is share some of the principles that we use all of the time with groups just to help frame the decision-making process. So that's the principle of the beach ball. The other one, some people would say that this is like, this is the DNA of facilitation, but that the knowledge is in the room. And so what that is that we have among the people that are here, absolutely everything that we need in order to have this conversation and in order to make this decision. Okay. Rachel, you want to do the next one? Sure. So this is really talking about how full participation and really everyone showing up with their attention really and leads to shared understanding. So if you have people showing up, fully participating, really sharing understanding and kind of sharing the knowledge in the room, then you can really get to an inclusive solution. And that's a solution that everyone has buy-in for, everyone kind of understands, and then you can take that solution and move it forward. Okay. The next one is listening and understanding, which is to say that doesn't necessarily agreement. That doesn't mean agreement, excuse me, and that participation doesn't mean unanimity. Okay. So let me say that one again. Listening and understanding is not the same as agreement, and participation is not the same thing as unanimity. I used this one just the other day
And I was glad that I had it because I had a participant who was saying, well, we're never going to come to consensus. And I was able to go back to this ground rule, which we had set up earlier, and say, okay, well, when you say consensus, what does that mean for you? And the participant said, well, that means that everybody agrees that this is the right thing to do. And I said, that's unanimity. That's not consensus. That's a different thing. Everybody agreeing, being in total agreement, that's unanimity. And remember, our goal here is to get a participatory decision-making process. And what that means is that it's okay for us to disagree with each other as long as we understand why people see the beach ball from those different sides. We can disagree, and we can still support the decision that comes out of the room. Rachel, you want to finish us out?
So this last principle is really about being specific about having clarity around the process. You know, as Brian said earlier in the chart, like if there is like a decision maker that is like, they are making this decision and everyone else is, you know, recommending, making recommendations or contributions or providing input. It's really about deciding who is deciding and how the decision is going to be made and being clear about that process, which is a really helpful thing, and it really can really frame the conversation so people know what's expected of them, and also like what the outcome might be. Like, are you going to walk away with the decision, or are you going to walk away with the recommendation where someone else might make a decision? So being clear about that process.
Cool. Kimberly, I noticed you came off mute. Did you have a question, comment about this?
Well, I just want to comment about that last one. I think that's really important. When I used to work in a corporation and led people, the unclarity of who was making the decision and how the decision was going to be made led to meeting upon meeting upon meeting and discussion upon discussion and all this sort of road blocking. And I even had a manager working for me who was complaining about all the meetings she had to have because no decision was being made. And we finally realized together she was the decision maker and she didn't even know it. So I like that last one.
That's a really, really keen insight. I think that arguably the most important thing that groups do is to make decisions, and yet they're rather ambiguous about how they actually do it. There's a lot around decision science. We're just going to do a light touch on it. But what I would say is if you find yourself in a place like that, go back to this, the tell, sell, consult, co-create. You say, what kind of meeting is this? And by the way, this is adapted from the 5th Discipline by Peter Senge. I am saying his name right. I recently learned how to pronounce it. Where you ask whoever's calling this meeting to say, okay, exactly what kind of meeting is this? Now, here's the trap. There's plenty of people that look at something like this and they say, oh, Brian, I'm a co-creative kind of leader, right? I want to hear from everybody. And I say, okay, well, sir, that's great. But here's the worst thing that you can do to erode trust. If you take a group through a decision-making process and they generate an idea, they generate a decision, and you decide, yeah, but we're not going to be doing that. That is the fastest way that you can break trust in an organization. So call it what it is. Maybe it's a consult where you just want to get their ideas and feedback, right? But using this, you can be authentic about that decision-making process. Okay, we're going to get you into, by the way, that's framing. We just wanted to do a light touch on that. There's a lot of other things you can do with framing. Other questions, comments before we move into openers and give you some modalities for openers? Okay, let's hit it. So if you would, please join me in the Google Doc right here where it says openers. We're going to start with an oldie but a goldie. We're going to start with brainstorming. So Alex Osborne was the guy that came up with brainstorming. Here's his rules as he wrote them. First of all, be freewheeling. The more wild the ideas, the better. Second, go for quantity. Third, build on the ideas of others. This is the yes and. And then fourth, withhold judgment. So here's the prompt. If you were 10 times bolder, what would you recommend for your organization? Now, if you're an independent, and a lot of us are, if you were 10 times bolder, what would you do with your own practice? So this could be an initiative, a strategy, a program, a policy, an offering, a service, a product, any idea. Okay. So go ahead and type in that white space. Many of you are already chomping at the bit to do. If you were 10 times bolder, what would you recommend? Make sure you hit a return a few times before you start typing so you're not typing on top of each other. Remember, go for quantity. Just because you have one idea doesn't mean you're done. So take a look at what other people wrote. At this moment, I really wish I could say that I like Rachel's idea about nap time in the afternoon, but that would be judgment, and that's breaking the rules. Okay, just another second or two on this before we move on. Rachel, do you want to do brainwriting, the next one? Cool. So we wanted to demonstrate brainstorming just because it is the most common way of opening to new ideas. We also wanted to show a way that you can do it virtually, just using something as simple as a Google Doc. I will tell you that the move to virtual has been really good for opening to new ideas because it's a lot easier to decouple the idea from the source. When you're doing this live in the room and people are calling out ideas, there's a lot of social pressure because of the power dynamics that are going on, because of lines of authority, because of reporting relationships. And so just like Pathspace and now with Google Docs, being able to bring in ideas anonymously allows us to judge them based on their own merit and not based on where they actually came from. So now that you've seen it, let me give you a few problems with brainstorming. So go down to the bottom of this box. So Susan Cain is the author of Quiet. She does not like brainstorming, especially like verbal brainstorming, because it tends to favor the extrovert and not so much the introvert. And what she says is that the problem with brainstorming is that it fails because of, I should probably have said production blocking first. Production blocking is one person talks and nobody else can. Right? So you've put yourself into a series process rather than parallel processing. The effect of that is you wind up with social loafing. So one person is talking, then nobody else can talk. Thanks for capturing that, Rachel. The other one is, as much as you say no judgment, well, we wouldn't be able to decide what we wanted for breakfast if we didn't judge. We naturally judge. So evaluation apprehension is something that's natural, and it's really, really hard to overcome that. Wallflowers, self-censorship, blank stares, the emperor's clothes, which is another way of saying groupthink, right? Or false consensus, win-lose thinking, passive aggression. That is all stuff that can come out of brainstorming. And you can overcome that if you're doing using anonymous brainstorming tools, okay? So just be aware of that if you're using it in a group. Any thoughts around brainstorming before we show you the next one? Amanda.
I'd just like to ask, how do you keep your Google Docs anonymous if you're in a company that has already got Google identities, profiles?
You can do actually incognito windows. Okay, so if you're using Chrome right now, if you held Control-Shift-N, it'll pop up an incognito window, which it'll act like you're not actually logged in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then you'll just log in by you'll log in incognito. Is that it?
No, you just don't log in, right? So you share the link in such a way, and just because I'm sharing my screen, I'll show you. You share the link in such a way that anyone with the link, anyone on the internet can edit it. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Good question, Amanda. Anything else? Okay, Rachel, brainwriting.
Yes, so brainwriting is really a way to kind of group source questions and challenges. So we're going to actually do this. So in a moment, you're going to scroll down into this lovely box full of things. And then in the first column, you will write a question or challenge that you have. And then after you write that, put your name on it. And then the second column, second, third, fourth columns, if you find something then that you have an answer to or suggestion, then you're going to write that out and kind of source information from the group. So yeah, go ahead and start. Just pick an empty column and maybe go down a couple and go ahead and start writing with your brain. And do remember to put your name and your answer as well, just in case someone has a question or they want to follow up about something. Spend another minute or two. And take a look around and see what other questions they have and any comments you might have and ways to contribute. All right, people are still typing, so give another 30 seconds to wrap up your thoughts.
I'm loving how to kill ants. That's probably my favorite thread.
You don't want to see what's going on in my bathroom and kitchen right now.
No, I suppose I don't.
I love the range of questions too, and like just challenges and things like that. All right. This is a good way to kind of, really get a lot of information and ideas from different people. And, you can frame the prompts so that maybe it's around a specific topic or a specific thing. We were pretty open because we're just modeling the thing. But, if we're trying to solve a problem or a decision, then maybe you can frame the question so it's about a specific part or decision or something like that. You can really use this in different ways.
So we love to use brainwriting just because of how generative it is, but unlike brainstorming, this is really structured. And so people can get really targeted advice. I mean, some of these ideas are great. I wrote the thing about dinner for 6. Of course, tacos show up again, but yeah, these are some great ideas. I'm going to try them out. Any thoughts about brainwriting before we move on? Okay. Sometimes you see this one, I'll add it up here. Sometimes this is also known as asset mapping. There's a few books out there that describe exactly the same activity, but it's called, I think brainwriting actually does it a little bit better justice. Okay, so the next one that we're going to do, Heather, this is going to look familiar. Go ahead and scroll down to mind maps. Heather drew that. Isn't she great? So here's the geeky term for a mind map. A mind map is a radial network diagram. How do you like that? That starts in the center with whatever topic it is that you're jamming on, right? That's that question mark at the beginning of the divergent opening process. And then what you do is that you capture in branches topics around that, and then you break off into subtopics and subtopics. And if you're seeing this is doing a good enough job. Let me give you an example of a completed one on how to mind map. So again, if you want to click on follow me where I am, this is a mind map on how to mind map. I know, meta, right? So for example, doing this on paper, or in our line of work, maybe doing this on a big whiteboard or big paper. But I got to tell you, if I'm going in cold, and it's happened occasionally where I've found myself facilitating and I didn't know I was going to facilitate. I always start with a mind map, just as a way of capturing thoughts and organizing them, to providing some sort of structure. Okay. So we're not actually going to demonstrate mind mapping. We just wanted to show it to you. This is something that's better done on your own. Even if it's an individual thing, if you've got, for example, a speech or a talk you have to give, or a paper that you've got to write, a mind map is a fantastic way to organize your thoughts. We've got 3 different examples in here of mind maps. Again, one of them is by Heather Martinez. And we'll just share this with you as a resource. In chat, Stephanie says mind mapping would be great for unconferences or open space technology. Absolutely. I haven't done unconferences before, but I've done a ton of open space, and I love bringing mind maps in there just as a way of organizing the thoughts. Okay, any thoughts on mind mapping before we move on? Again, we just wanted to show them off. We have them here because they're a great way of opening up to new ideas and structuring it as you go. So any thoughts on mind mapping before we move on? Okay. You'll have this as a resource. You can go back and take a look at this. Next, we're going to move on to drawing out information. Now, this is something that we modeled with PathSpace. Rachel, as I'm pulling out the PathSpace artifacts, I guess, do you want to talk a little bit about these?
Sure. So as Brian is doing that, then really drawing out information is, we did this a little bit earlier, when Brian asked the question, like, do people have any questions or not understand anything? It was like pulling out enough information, like, The Godfather was a restaurant, not the movie. And this is really kind of going into, like, if you have all these ideas, taking a step back and looking at them, or, if you have all this kind of generative things and looking at them and like just asking clarifying questions. So you've stopped adding more things, and you're just maybe clarifying, maybe how does this work for 6 people, or, just asking clarifying questions to make sure everyone has a shared understanding of, what is going on around the beach ball. Hmm. And Brian, are you ready, or are you still?
Yep. So the goal with with drawing out information and asking clarifying questions really is to just make sure that we're on the same page. Like, for example, Lainey asks, what's the difference between open space and unconference? So Stephanie, do you think you can speak to that?
I can try, since I've only been to one of each.
Okay.
The unconference was, oh gosh, and I just realized my first unconference that I just went to a few weeks ago used open space technology.
Oh.
So anyway, for unconference, from what I understand, is that you basically go to a space. It could be virtual or it could be in person, and whoever is there decides the topics, and then those topics are posted. Whoever wants to learn about those topics go to those places. And I think, but someone, please correct me if I'm wrong, my observation was open space technology is also a liberating structure, and I think is based on the unconference idea. And in this case, what I experienced, there was an actual platform that supported ideas being generated and then bringing up discussion, and then the combining of similar ideas where then people could then go, and there was no expectations of staying. It's like you stay as long as you want. You can be a butterfly or a bee buzzing around pollinating. Different guiding principles. Mm-hmm. I hope that helps. Someone could probably explain better.
Anybody want to add to that, the difference between open space and unconference? Okay. So here's a shorthand, and this is just my own take on it. So I find that unconference is even like less structured than open space. Even open space has some structure around it. If you want to find out more about open space, sorry about my green screen. Open Space Technology by Harrison Owen. This is everything that you need to know about running one of those. Okay. And it's a really great resource. So getting back to drawing out information, again, the goal here is to ask clarifying questions, make sure we're all on the same page, but absolutely not to pass judgment or to start weighing the pros and cons. We will get to that. The purpose of this is just to make sure that everybody understands all of these ideas. And realistically, you'll get into the refining process and somebody will say, wait a minute, I don't understand what Godfathers is. So you have to go back and draw out a little bit of information there. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and move on. This next one we just wanted to share with you. We're not actually going to demonstrate it. So this one has a lot of different names. It's a 90-second serial share, round robin, or a go around. I found that folks on the East Coast tend to call it a round robin. Folks on the West Coast tend to call it a go around. But it is, what is it you'd like to advocate for or against? So at this point, we've got all the ideas out. Now this is the chance where people get to speak their mind. Okay. And we like to do a 90-second serial share because we hear all voices and it actually avoids the back and forth that can actually be counterproductive to good decision making. We didn't actually share this with the folks at Kobeck. One of the things that's actually come out recently in the field of neuropsychology is that we actually like to think that we gather information and then we make decisions. In fact, what we do is we make decisions and then we look for information that justifies our decision. In other words, we tend to get onto the line of advocacy a lot faster than we stay on the line of inquiry. And so what this does by doing a 90-second serial share is it gives people the opportunity to speak their case and then move on and hear from somebody else. Okay. All right. Those are the two modalities we wanted to share with you around drawing out information. Any comments on this before we move on to refining? In chat, Nicola says, what is the easiest way to do this over video? We popcorn, but I wonder if that's the best way. Do you mean a 90-second serial share, Nicola?
Yeah, that's what I was asking about.
Okay, so here's the way that I like to do it over video. And then Christine, I'll get your question. So the way that I like to do it is to grab my handy snipping tool, take a screenshot and drop it in to whatever the meeting space is. Now, if you all see where I am, okay, I've got the participant list just like that. And so we would go from top to bottom. Now, the reason I like to do a screen grab like that is because as people are going on and off mute, this participant list is going to change. And so I want a static list that stays the same. So we're going to hear from Brian and then Rachel and then Christine. Functionally, most people don't use the whole 90 seconds. It's usually more like 45. So does that answer your question, Nicola?
Yeah, that seems way faster than popcorning because people are like, oh, wait, I have to choose someone to pick next. And then that eats up time. So I like this because it gives an order.
Yeah, that popcorn works if you've got a small group, but it can be hard to track if you've got 20, like who's spoken and who hasn't.
I just drag them on Zoom, but yes.
Works.
Most people don't do that. And they're like, who hasn't gone?
You could do that too. Stephanie, what's coming up for you?
Well, what I'm thinking is, I think it depends on what the issues are, because it seems to me for people to be able to speak freely, they need to feel very psychologically safe in the environment. So it just makes me think about the power dynamics, the relationships, impression management, all of that starts coming up for me. And yeah, so I was just thinking that if there was like an idea that people needed to come to a conclusion about, one thing that I've been working with is dividing people into two teams and saying, okay, this team over here, you say why this idea is so great. This team over here, why it's, you know, what are all the challenges with it? Really beat up this idea and then switch teams and try to like even have a competition of who can beat it up the most as a way to provide more safety for some, depending on, you know, again, depending on what the topic is.
Yep. I'm adding, so at the bottom of this, I'm adding some variation. So as you said, have one group advocate for and another group advocate against. So to your point, before you're going to do something like this, you have to make sure that there's safety in the room so that people can feel okay sharing their thoughts. Now, that hopefully you would have figured that out way before the meeting ever started, as you're doing your discovery and your preparation for this, as you're talking to the, I personally, I like to talk to about 10% of the participants before I ever do a facilitation, so that I can suss out, okay, is there going to be safety in the room? Can they get to it? Or do we need to be a little bit more, as you said, prescriptive in it? So variations on have one group advocate for, another one advocate against. You could do what's called a pre-mortem, okay? A pre-mortem is the idea, it's not like a post-mortem. Post-mortem, how did this fail? How do we prevent that? A pre-mortem is how might this fail? And how do we prevent that? And then another one, Stephanie, just to build on your idea of having one group advocate for and another one against, is to use Edward de Bono's 6 hats. So that's one where there's some very specific roles, like this person is very optimistic towards this idea. This is the financial perspective, and so on and so forth. So you actually ask people to adopt those roles. I will tell you personally, I don't prefer to do the 6 hats, if only because it can be a little bit difficult to get people to play in a role that's not their natural strength. And I just personally rather have people tell me their side of the beach ball from where they stand. But it's a valid method. You could certainly do that. Christine, what's coming up for you?
Well, first, I was just going to say that I like how your graphic above of the serial share looks like candles, like the light passing from one to the next. But I was going to build on this idea of the variation of having one group advocate for and another group. A way to do that would be in the format of a fishbowl, where you have 2 chairs. This is in person, and then people sort of tap in and tap out to in the for or the against chair. So you're not assigning, who's going to be for or against, but people can choose which chair they want to sit in. Does that make any sense at all? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can do this virtually too if you just spotlight those 2 people. And,
oh.
Yeah, and so what you could do is you could have people volunteer by raising their hand, right? You could say, okay, we need somebody for the pro case. They raise their hand, and then you swap the spotlight out. If you really wanted to mess with people, you just randomly spotlight them in. They're like, oh, I guess it's my turn to advocate, right?
I like that.
You may or may not want to do that last part. Some great ideas. All right, I'm capturing these. If you click on where I am, you can see where I'm getting these ideas. Anything else before we move on to refiners?
I had something in the chat.
Oh, what'd you have in the chat? I missed it.
How do you facilitate those who overshare?
That
off? Is this like a different class?
No. It is a different, it's a little bit off of drawing out information. But let's use it in the context of a 90-second serial share. Let's say that somebody blows past their time, right? So how would you deal with that? Let's facilitate this one a little bit. Somebody blows past their time. What do you do? And just call it out. Amanda?
I suppose it would be depending on how safe everybody is. I mean, we can throw around an Elmo or a rabbit going down the rabbit hole. Often what I do is I just start drawing on a board, capturing people's thoughts. Like, and then I ask, is this the essence of what you're saying? Because the moment they see me writing, they like start checking what they're more conscious of their words. And then, if they see their words going up, it kind of, it just makes them think twice before they just ramble on. And it also helps them to see that they've been heard. Because often I find people that are rambling, like, oh, nobody's listening to me. I need to explain this more and more and more.
Yeah, Amanda, you're absolutely right. And that's one of my favorite ways to do it, just because you're not shaming people with that, right? You're demonstrating to them that they've been heard. A slight variation to that is you could say something like, Stephanie, could you give that to me in such a way that I can capture it on this flip chart, right? And so they do the synthesis for you. Stephanie asked, what's an Elmo? Yeah, enough. Let's move on. Okay. Heather adds, we can take this offline. Okay. Wait, were you saying like we could take this conversation, or that's something you could say if somebody overshares?
No, but that is good. I mean, I guess you could say that we can take this offline, but no, I'd love to have this conversation with you later, because I've been diving into it pretty deep. So
I'll tell you that here's the one that I always fall back on, is that if I've got somebody and they're just doing a lot of the work, I might say something like this. Heather, you're doing a lot of lifting for this group, right? I'd like to make some space for some other people to also carry the load. Because if you shame somebody,
lost trust.
Yeah, you're done. So I had one, I was co-facilitating and somebody actually just muted the speaker. I was like, what happened? Did we lose it? They're like, no, that guy was just talking too much. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, wrong move. Thanks.
All right. Add to the car park and revisit. Get that in there. All right, let's talk a little bit about refiners. And just because Rachel is scribing for me, I'll go ahead and get the next part too. So refining, that is where we've got these ideas. Now we try to do some sense making around them. Now we already demonstrated one of our favorite ways of doing that, which is clustering ideas or affinity clusters. So here's a really, this is by no means a pretty graphic recording, but this is a great graphic facilitation, right? So this is coming up with vision initiatives. First, clustering what's similar, right? Identifying those themes and then having them do a dot vote. This is exactly the same thing that we did when we were deciding where we wanted to go eat, okay? I think that doing affinity clusters, or just clustering if you like, that should be something that's in every facilitator's toolbox, just because it's part of the sense-making process, okay? We've already demonstrated, we don't really need to say anything more about that unless you have any questions or comments around clustering ideas. So any thoughts around that? Okay. Rachel, you want to talk a little bit about polling while I set up the Mentimeter?
Sure.
Okay.
So polling is another way to really just kind of get the feel for how the group is maybe leaning. And there's a couple of different ways you can do it. I think we're going to go through several of them. I think we're going to start with a straw poll, which is really, there's a, it's here you can see it's like pick your top choice. So if you would just use your phone, you can point at the screen, or you can click the link in the box to go to the Mentimeter. And this is really, we're going to do a straw poll about, okay, where do we want to go for lunch?
So again, you can pull out your camera's phone, aim it at this QR code, tap the link, or you can just click the link that I dropped into chat. So we're going to repeat the process and just say, all right, what's your top choice, right? Let's see how we're doing. Okay. Okay, looks like Chipotle has jumped in the lead, followed by Firehouse Subs, Jersey Mike's, and Taco Bell. Chipotle still in the lead with number 4 votes against it. 8 people have weighed in, followed by Firehouse Subs, Five Guys, Jersey Mike's, Panera Bread, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell. In-N-Out Burgers comes from behind. Chipotle still in the lead, pulls ahead with 5 votes.
In a horse race, I think that Chipotle is kind of really going to run over the line.
Oh, we got 12 people who have voted out of 20 so far. Let's give it just a second. Okay. And it looks like it's Chipotle by a nose. All right, let me go ahead and save this. Cool. Rachel, anything else you want to say about straw polls?
This is something that's nice to do, and so you can frame it in different ways, where if you're just, maybe you're not like finalizing the decision, but you're like, okay, we're getting close, and you can kind of get a feel for where people are. And, again, going back to the, like, how are you deciding and who's deciding, you could kind of say, this is not a, final choice. We're just kind of getting a feel. And, because if you have a lot of, it's like split between 4 different things, maybe you can kind of narrow it down. So it's a way to kind of feel how people are leaning, and it's a good way to use it as a bit of a narrowing conversation tool.
Yeah, to say it's a non-binding straw poll, just to get a feel for the room. Now, here's because sometimes, going back to that idea of advocacy versus inquiry, sometimes groups can get stuck on inquiry. What I mean by that is they're just discussing just for the sake of discussing. And so if you pull out a tool like this, it could be that the issue that everybody's debating, they're actually all in agreement. They just like arguing. I mean, and that happens a lot with groups, right? So it's like, hey, I just want to see where people stand on this issue, because we've been spending the last 7 hours talking about where we're going to go have dinner. Let's just do a poll. Okay, it looks like Chipotle. Can anybody not live with Chipotle? Let's go ahead. Yeah, Laura, I saw your note in chat. We need to talk. Yeah, that's exactly who I was thinking of. So again, if you say this is a non-binding straw poll, it can be a way of like moving them from that inquiry back to the advocacy space. Okay. All right, let's do another one. Actually, we've already done the next one that we wanted to demonstrate already. Let me go ahead and drop it in. So in terms of voting, we talked a little bit about using actually this is a bad screenshot. Let me do a better one. We talked a little bit about using dot votes, right? Or if you like, weighted votes. So there's actually two ways that I could have set this up back in PathSpace. One of them was to, as we did, which is to say, you can put as many dots on as you want on the one that you have some energy around. And what that will do is it will have the impact of ramping up the advocacy. It will ramp up the energy. And so if you're sensing that people are not necessarily advocating their position, if you're seeing a lot of like this, right, little closed body language and people are getting a little frankly, and you're just concerned that people are not really sharing what they feel deep down inside, I think that that's a case to do a weighted dot vote, right? Where it's to say you can put as many dots on one of these ideas as you like, okay? If on the other hand, you've, actually, let's go ahead and demonstrate the next one. Here we go. Hang on just a second, let me set it up. If on the other hand, you've got a lot of really, really strong opinions, you could do a forced dot vote where you have to spread out your dots. So let's go ahead and demonstrate one of those. So if you would, find your way back to Mentimeter. I'll drop the link into chat again, just in case it got away from you. Okay. Now this time what we want you to do is pick your top 5 choices. Okay. Well, now this time, take a look at that. Well, we had Chipotle and Panera were evenly tied. Let's see where this goes. They are again, very interesting. 13 people have weighed in. Let's see, what did we have last time? Looked like 14 total. Okay, we're at 14. Now look at this. This is really interesting. Same question, but now we have different results, right? And so it's important to note that sometimes you're going to want to double up on these refining methods because you will get different results from time to time. So somebody help me out. What do you think is going on here? Why do we get different results even though we're asking the same question? Any thoughts on this?
I think it's easier to skew when it's weighted. So, because I can go and take all 10 my votes or 5 votes and put it on one thing. So I'm going to really weigh in on something so I can tip that scale very quickly.
Yeah, and that's the point. If you want to dial up the energy, if you're concerned that people are being too withholding, if they're not speaking their mind, if you're sensing that, then that would be the case where you want to use a weighted dot vote. Okay. Any other thoughts on this? This is really interesting because we had one result with one and then a different one with a different one. Laura, what's coming up?
I have a thought going back a step,
Uh-huh.
and that is when you use physical voting dots. What I have learned is if I am working with engineers, I have to say, you will not split your dots.
Oh yeah.
We will not have quarter dots. We will not have 3/4 dots. 3/8 dots are out of the question. And it doesn't happen with any other type of professional other than the engineers.
I've found that there's one other type, but I'm not going to say it because this is being recorded.
Oh,
there's one other type.
Well, that ends my career with engineers.
I'm not gonna, that's all right. So the other thing that I've seen people do is that they will actually sell their dots to each other. Like we actually found like a black market in dots. It was pretty funny. I'm not kidding. That's absolutely true.
I totally believe it.
Yeah. Good observation, Laura. So there's one other thought in here. We didn't do it, but an n/3 is the idea of you take the number of options and you divide by 3, and that gets you the number of votes. That's a shorthand. It's a good way of saying, how many votes does everybody get? Of course, if you're voting against 100 different items, that's a little much. You might want to just limit it to 10 or 20. Okay. Christine says, then you got the people who bring their own dots. They know it's coming. Yeah, exactly. All right. Any thoughts on dot voting before we move on?
Well, I just wanted an observation on the question you asked about why is it different. It seems to me that telling me that trying to find the one choice that everybody's going to agree on is hard to do. But boy, if we actually looked at those second and third choices, it would be good enough if we all went to X, right? So I think this approach gives that sort of, okay, it's not really about one choice. It's, yeah, any of these could do. Okay, great.
And exactly, that is how you want to make the decision if you're going to do a weighted dot vote or a forced dot vote.
Yeah.
So this here, if you've got people, you know, a forced dot vote where I'm asking you to pick your top 5, you must take those dots. You must pick 5 different options. That's if people have been really dialed in on their side of the beach ball and they're not willing to consider other people's options. So if you want to open the aperture and have people consider other options, that's where you say, okay, pick your top 5. You would not do a weighted dot vote in that case. That's a really important observation. Okay, there's one other kind of poll we wanted to share with you, and that is a ranked order. We're still going to use Mentimeter for that. So same question. Now this time what we want you to do is to arrange these in order of your preference. So what's your first choice, second choice, third choice? Okay. And again, I'll drop this into chat so that you've got it. In chat, Trent says, and an engineer who stole dots from me and skewed his entire department funding for the entire fiscal year. Welcome, Trent. It's nice to see you.
And you don't have to, on this one, rank all 15.
Right. You can, yeah, you do the first 4 and call it a day. That's fine. Panera Bread jumps out into the lead, followed by Jersey Mike's, Potbelly, Chipotle, Taco Bell. Chipotle pulls ahead. Chipotle in second place, followed by Potbelly, Jersey Mike's, Taco Bell, Five Guys, Chick-fil-A, In-N-Out Burger. Pizza Hut pulls ahead of In-N-Out Burger. Chipotle in the lead, followed by Panera. We've got 11 votes in. Been stopping at around 14. Oh, and look at that. Panera jumps to the lead. We've got one more vote still hanging out there. It's neck and neck. Going once, twice, and it's Chipotle by a nose. Okay, very nice. Let me pull this one in. So a ranked order. I will tell you the traditional way of doing this when you're in the room is to take a whole bunch of sticky notes, draw a line, and have people talk about it. Is it A or B? A or B? Like a, you know, like a vision test. And that is a grind. It's just a grind to do that in a large group. Using a tool like Menti, it just makes it a lot easier. Okay. All right. So those are the technical, the technology that we wanted to share with you. What kind of a ranked choice is this? So this has got a couple of different names to it. You can call this a 1 to N list. Okay. Or you can call it a forced sort. Either way, it's fine. Okay. A lot of these things have multiple names. I'll type them both in. So ranked order, a forced sort, it's all the same thing. Yeah, Amanda.
I was just wondering, I like the energy of the race commentary. My first response was like, don't tell me. I need to focus on what I need to put in there.
That's just for you guys. I don't do that with groups, just so you know.
Because it would definitely skew me, you know, to like, oh, because for instance, there's a bunch of these places I don't even know what they are. So I'm like, oh, okay, Firehouse subs, no idea.
Yeah, that's just for you guys. I don't do that with groups unless, you know, I really have worked with them for a long time. All right. Rachel, you want to talk about how you do this visually?
Sure. So really this is something where you can use cameras, and this is something where you can have everyone, you want to make sure you can see everybody. But maybe you could just do like a straw poll. So thumbs up, thumbs down. Like, how do you feel about going to Chipotle? You just literally do thumbs up, thumbs down, you know, and then you can just really get like a visual view of everybody. You can do like thumbs up, thumbs down, sideways, like, you know, when you talk about it more. So maybe that's a question. Then the fist to 5, which is, you know, really just using the hand of, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5, you know, how much, maybe, how comfortable are you with this decision? Like 5, super comfortable, 1, you're like, no. That's just a really quick way to do visual polling. Just really use a lot of people, and you can do it in a room. You can do it like using cameras. So it's really like a lot of visual ways you can engage people.
One thing I would say is that just for the fist of 5, when you say use a 1 to describe your dissatisfaction with an idea, be prescriptive about which finger you want people to lift, because you might get the wrong finger if you're not prescriptive about that. Okay. Okay. Any thoughts on polling, visual polling, using technology for polling before we move on? Anything else? Christine says, oh, good one. Yeah, a human graph. Tape down the middle of the room and ask participants to take a position on the line. I've heard a couple of different names for that one. Human graph is one of them. I really like that one because you were literally putting people in a place of advocacy. Nancy, what's coming up for you?
Yeah, I was have used the dot voting both physically and electronically with polling devices. And one thing about people doing it physically is I've had in the debrief, people tell me that, you know, they were really influenced by where somebody else put their red dot. So that's, I think, a big advantage of the way that the techniques that you've shown us today that don't involve that.
Yeah. Thanks, Nancy. So Trent, hybrid. Actually, it's a lot easier than it sounds. Just have everybody use Mentimeter. You know, most people have cell phones with them. Just pull them out and have everybody do it, right? That's a way of keeping it anonymous, and you know, you'll just have the results show up on a shared screen somewhere. I'm sure there's tons of nuances why that wouldn't work, but I think that's the easiest way of doing it, is just have everybody use the technology. So Trent, Dawn, how well does that answer your question about hybrid? Yeah.
It answers it well enough for me for right now. I'm also thinking about the whole BYOD, bring your own device.
Yep.
For people who might be in the room. And I'm thinking about some places and organizations where you can't bring phones into the room.
Yeah, it's
but you still have a hybrid setting. So
yeah, it's knacky. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on. Rachel, I'm happy to do impact implementation if you want to do it. It's up to you.
You can do it.
Okay, cool. So if you don't mind, let me switch my camera around a little bit. We'll go like this. Okay. And this too. So impact implementation matrix. So what we've done so far, remember, we're still in that refining place. How are we coming up with the criteria by which we're going to judge these ideas? So any 2x2 matrix is a good way of racking and stacking some ideas. The criteria that we use all the time is impact and ease of implementation. This goes by a lot of different names. Sometimes it's called a difficulty or impact matrix. But you basically, on the left side, you say, okay, what impact is this going to have? You could be talking about, you know, making money. You could be talking about reach to your stakeholders. You could be talking about mission output. So that's the impact side. And then ease of implementation, very hard or very easy. This is the resource side. So is it going to cost a lot of money? Is it going to take a lot of time? Is it going to take a lot of human resources? And so I've got an example on the right. Another one's impact urgency. Yeah, you can pretty much put any two factors that you want on there. And it's just as important when you're working with the group to have them define, what do we mean when we say impact? What do we mean when we say ease of implementation? So if you take a look at the yellow stickies there, that's one that I did for Fairfax County with a tree initiative that they had. And they defined, here's what we mean when we say impact. Here's what we mean when we say ease of implementation. And once you got all those, in this case, it was projects, you can rack and stack them. Now, I would say that this one should be coupled with some other technique. This one doesn't decide on its own. Even though it says on the left, you would rule out, generally, you'd rule out the ones that are very hard and have low impact. You'd have to evaluate and prioritize the ones that are in the middle, and then you'd give preference to the ones that are high impact and very easy. Although, I got to tell you, occasionally, I've been in the room, I've done an impact implementation matrix, and everybody started doing this. Like they got all frinkly, right? They got all like twisted up on themselves and were like, you know, they just didn't look very happy. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm noticing that there's some really unhappy body language going on. What's going on here? And he said, well, Brian, here's the thing. We would do this stuff if we could, but unfortunately we work for the federal government. And by law, we have to do all this stuff that's very low impact and very difficult, right? So it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. So, you know, what I would say is that you have to couple this with something else, whether it's a dot vote, but this by itself, you just want to double check on this one. Okay. All right. Any thoughts on this before we move on?
I just put in the chat
that
I struggle with this impact and easy one because it's often the better way to do something is harder. And I saw that a lot of people would just like, hey, this is the easy way out, easy way out, easy way out. And in the end, we a lot of things suffer, like quality and, you know, the long-term impact, you know, because it's, oh, now the impact's fine and it's easy, let's just do it. Low-hanging fruit, or it's a buzzword from the leaders. But actually, we need to plan this thing out properly, because this is the better way. This is a better way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely, Amanda. And that's why you would want to, I think you'd want to do a dot vote, even after you do something like this, to make sure that we're not giving up something that is, you know, very hard, but is going to have a lot of impact to it. Okay.
I picked up on a different nuance in Amanda's comment, and that is, maybe it's just my nature, but I believe there's an element of human nature where we ask ourselves how hard something is going to be rather than how easy something is going to be.
That's a good point. Okay. Anything else? Rachel, you want to do the gradients of agreement?
Sure.
Okay.
So gradients agreement is another way to really kind of pull out where people are on the scale, but it's also nice in that you can kind of highlight the dissenting voices. So if someone, you ask a question like, you know, where people want, you know, how much in agreement are you in going to Chipotle for dinner? And you have people kind of just put their little dot on their scale. And like, okay, we have a lot of people that are 1, 2, 3, but you know, there's one person that's, you know, a 6 or a 7 or an 8. And you're like, okay, what would make you, can ask them the question, like, what would make you move towards agreement? And then, you know, they can maybe share some information, you know, or like, I heard this really cool thing about Chipotle, or really, you know, crazy thing about Chipotle, like, I don't want to go there, like, da, da, da. And you can ask the group to kind of, okay, now with this new information, how might you like vote again? So that might shift the conversation, shift the decision. This is a really nice tool to kind of pull out and kind of start closing the conversation, but also still like getting that information that people might still need to make a decision.
We've got a demonstration of a gradients of agreement. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. Here we go. So if you would please find your way back to Mentimeter. The code is at the top of, wait a minute. The code is about to be at the top of my screen. Here we are. Let's assume that it's Taco Bell. To what extent do you agree that we should eat at Taco Bell? So we've got 1, support with reservations. Okay. We've got about 13 people who have weighed in. This is actually a pretty even distribution. I was hoping that we'd see a little bit more uneven distribution, because there's one move with the gradients of agreement or any kind of refining moment that I think is really important and worth pointing out. Let's assume, just for the sake of argument, that everybody here was like all in full agreement around, yeah, we all want to go to Taco Bell. And then you had one person that said 6. Well, I don't like it, but I'll support it. Okay. What do you think you should do in that moment? So you've got most people agree, and then you got one person says, I don't like it, but I'll support it. Any thoughts on that? Trent, I notice you're off mute. Did you have a thought on this one?
Would you ask the people that are wholeheartedly endorsing it to say why they would do it, so that maybe that person could be influenced or have more information?
You could, yeah. What's another option?
I think if you're saying that everyone is 5 or above, wait, no, is there any 5s? Most people are 1, 2, and 3, with 1 don't like it, but will support it.
Right.
I think that you go for it because they'll support it. It's not a hard veto, which I feel like would change it.
Okay, let's go with that then. What if it was a hard veto? You've got 99% of people that are in the 1s, 2s, and 3s, and then 1 hard veto.
I think that's when you go to discussion and be like, well, what's the reasoning for the veto? What do you need to change? Or is it just a veto and then we don't go there?
Well, how come? I mean, you've got a majority rule there. Why would you do that?
Well, I feel like it depends on the decision, but like if the reason is like, I literally cannot eat any food at Taco Bell, then like, that's not a good option because someone's not going to have lunch.
All right, absolutely. So that is I think that I watched somebody do this and it made a big impression with me. I was in a big conference setting, 300 people in the room, And we had these paddles. One side was green, one of them was red, right? And what happened is that we were, making some decisions around the future of this company. They wanted it to be as holistic as possible. And what happened is that there was this one move where, like, easily 99% of people put up a green paddle, and this one person put up a red one or two people in this one area. And this was a little bit early in my career. If it had been me, I would have said, okay, well, we've got majority rule. Let's go ahead and move on. Here's what this other facilitator did. And I'm so glad I was working with her. She said, well, hang on a second. I noticed that there's 2 or 3 people that put the red paddles up. What's going on for you, right? What do you see that the rest of the group doesn't? And they shared something. And after that, boom, all of the red paddles went up, right? So that's the power of group decision-making, right? Is that if you're really bringing in all sides of the beach ball, you're going to leverage that cognitive diversity so that you're really making the best decision, right? Not just the one that everybody wants to go with. Laura, what's coming up for you?
2 things. First of all, you may have somebody with a religious consideration about food. So if I eat kosher and I can't go to Taco Bell, I mean, it's not like Char Bar in DC. So that's one piece. The other thing is the classic story about this is the Challenger disaster. And there is a wonderful video, old video, but it's one engineer in the room. And I denigrated engineers, so I'm so delighted I can undenigrate. Raised the concern about the O-rings.
Yep.
And everybody else wanted to go with the political push, which was really coming hard and fast from DC.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
That's right. February 28th, 1986. That left a big impression. That's actually
it's January 28th because I was in the hospital with my firstborn.
You're right. And February 28th would be a little bit close to it. One thing I do remember is that the Rogers Commission, which looked into it, they said, we believe that the culture of NASA had as much to do with the disaster as anything mechanical. Right?
Absolutely.
And it was a Tuesday. Have I got that right? That's one of those, like, you remember where.
Yes, it was. It was a Tuesday. It was the Tuesday after the Super Bowl.
Yep. So I got that right. So being smart doesn't necessarily guarantee a good decision.
That's right.
Smart people don't, I mean, like, they had crazy smart people working at NASA. They had crazy smart people working at Morton Thiokol, which was who that engineer worked for. Yeah. So if you are giving voice to the minority, a lot of the times what you're doing is that rather than just going with what the group wants, you are making space for those insights that are going to give you rocket fuel that will get you into the next phase of your existence as an organization, or you're going to overcome disasters. Whew, that's got heavy. All right, let's move on. Rachel, you've already done the gradients of agreement with the spiral, right?
I didn't talk about the spiral, it's dropped in there. But this is just another way that I was drawing the spiral. I saw a conversation in the chat and I actually pulled out more discussion needed and abstain from the kind of the range of agreements. I was just playing with it. I thought I'd offer it up as a thing I iterated.
Yeah, I think actually, let's see, Trent and Heather and Laura all said kind of the same thing, that it's a little weird with the gradients of agreement, that the 4 and 5 are this. So Rachel designed this one. I think it's fantastic. Okay. All right, cool. Let's look at another refining tool. Now this one, admittedly, this is a little bit heavy, but let me explain how this one works. So you could think of this as those diamonds there as filters in a vacuum, right? And so what you would do is you would take all of the ideas where it says options, you'd stick them underneath there, and then you would ask a series of questions. Okay, now I've just come up with a few that you can use. This is what's called VRIO. Is it valuable? Is it rare? Is it inimitable, which is to say, can it be easily copied, or is it organizationally supported? But the point is that you would want to use a tool like this where you have more than one variable to consider. So for example, the impact implementation matrix, that's a 2x2. You're asking really 2 questions. If you need to ask more than 2 questions, if there's more than 2 criteria that you've got to apply, you can use something like this. But let me warn you, this is a grind, right? It's difficult to pull a group through this process. And so, like with anything, the juice has got to be worth the squeeze. You would not want to apply this to where are we going to go have dinner tonight, it would not be worth it, right? So you're going to save this one for like your strategic planning, your big initiatives, where it really, really matters. And so the idea is that you hopefully come up with binary questions. That is to say, questions that can be answered yes or no. And you say, well, is it valuable? Which is to say, well, over half of our customers use it. Will it bring us a profit margin over 50%? You're going to want to have some clear metrics against this one, and then physically move these options through those filters. And of course, the ones that make it all the way through, those would presumably be the ones that you'd actually want to do. Okay. So again, I just wanted to talk about this one. We're not actually going to demo it. What are your questions around this one? Questions, comments before we move on? Stephanie says, could be interesting to do the 2x2 after this multivariate. Yep, just as a way of refining it. In fact, what you can do, if you're like a real ninja, like Trent Wake Night, Marker Ninja, is that you can do like a whole, like, you know, factory assembly line where you get down to the end and then you do, for example, like a 1 to n list. So we've got all these options that we could do. Now let's do a 1 to n list and sort them out, or do a 2x2 after this. Stephanie, what's coming up?
Well, and it just occurred to me that, you know, if you do a matrix like after this, where you're looking at low, you know, like easy to implement versus difficult, it can just help with the prioritization or who it's assigned to. Like it could, you know, just when you follow up with your whole action plan that follows something like this.
Yes, and that's a perfect segue, because now that we've made our decision, then we move to the closers, right? And so it's those closers, that's where we actually get into the assigning of who's going to do what. So the difference here is that it's making the decision versus planning the decision. Okay. So we're going to hit that in just a second, Stephanie. But before we do, any questions about this modality? Okay, let's hit it then. So closers, we've made our decision. Now, how do we close this thing? Here's a couple of ideas. So one word feedback. Okay. Some of you have seen one word checkouts, one word to describe the mood with which you're leaving. This is one word feedback. You do a quick go around and you say, okay, we've come up with this decision. This is what we're going to do. In one word, give me your feedback, right? Usually people cheat, love it, you know, hate it, whatever. But the point is to keep it short. And by the way, these get progressively bigger. So another one, Heather and Trent have seen this one a million times. I like, I wish, what if, right? So this is this is another way of giving feedback on the decision. When we set this up, I like to go back to where it actually came from, which is design school. So in design, it's not about the actual product, it's about the process that people take. And so as a part of that, they give a structured feedback model. And if you give the structure to it, it's got a little bit of the sting of feedback taken out of it. If you know you're going to get feedback with I like, I wish, or what if, then it becomes a lot easier to take, rather than it's like, well, this thing over here, do we really want it like that? That can be hard to listen to. Well, I like this. I wish it had that. What if we did this? Okay. Now this one we're actually going to demo. So if you don't mind, please follow me where I am. We're going to do what's called the Ben Franklin close. Okay. So click to where I am in the Google Docs. Yep. And you're already jumping into it. So the idea here is that you come up with objections and then answer the objection on the other side. Okay. So for example, too much salt. Some people need a lot of salt. Perfect example. Okay. Not everybody has to do this one. It's just for the demo. I only left 5 spaces in. Right. Okay, so that's a Ben Franklin close. Has anyone seen this one before? Trent, maybe?
Yes.
Okay, just because you were off mute. Did you want to say anything else about it?
I was just going to ask for the Google Doc link since I joined late. No, don't be sorry.
Okay.
Sorry to slow you down here.
Nope, I got you. Oh, Heather's already got you covered. Look at that.
Heather's on it. Thank you.
Man, it's like she graduated from the Tech Host Academy or something. That's amazing. All right, so that's the Ben Franklin close. Is you give people a chance to lay out all their objections and then answers to those objections. And then Stephanie, you called it. here's your action plan. Okay. So we don't have to fill this one out, but I think a good action plan has got 5 elements to it. First of all, what is the action? Who's doing it? What's the first step that they're going to take? And then when is that first step going to be done? And then just a box to check it off. Okay. Now, this is a little bit different than some action plans where it's like, well, when is the complete action going to be done? Not just the first step. But oftentimes people don't necessarily know that when they're in the room. They have to go off and do a little bit of research. And if you press that question too hard, people can get hung up and it can derail the process of actually coming up with the action plan. So it's like, you don't have to tell me the whole thing, but I do need to know when what your first step is going to be and when is it going to be done. Now, Stephanie, just because you brought up action plans before, are there any other elements that you'd like to see in an action plan?
Just real quick, I haven't seen this type of a format of just like cutting it off at this point but I really like this because I'm really playing with what allows for emergent, adaptive, generative type things that can come up. So yeah, I'm liking this format, or looking at 15%, like what's that 15% tiny minuscule step that can be done.
Yeah, because the idea is that you want them to actually build some momentum, right? Before because if they hit a brick wall right before the end of the meeting, right, chances are stuff is not going to happen. We can talk later about design thinking. So using design thinking modalities to actually not stop at the action plan, but to prototype and model and test some ideas while they're still in the room with you. That can be a fabulous way of building momentum. It's a little bit beyond scope of what we're talking about. This doesn't have to be complicated. I mean, this is really just on a flip chart. You just capture this stuff out. Dawn, what's coming up?
Yeah, I've actually asked, what are you going to do tomorrow? And what are you
Nice.
gonna do next week, to just get them going. So.
What are you going to do next week? Any other variations on that? What are you going to do tomorrow? What are you going to do next week?
I just simplify it to what's the right first next step.
The right first next step.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you, Kimberly.
Mhm.
Okay. Action plan, that's like at a basic. Oh, here we go. So from Heather, what resources or other departments do we need in order to be successful? Okay, so I'll pull that one in. Variation on that is to say, who's not here that should be? Right? Like who do we not invite for this one that should probably be a part of the next one? Okay, almost done. One other thing I wanted to share with you. Okay, so if you don't mind, just go ahead and click down here. You can join me at what's called the project canvas, and I will drop one of these into chat so you can play around with it. So this is a project plan in a box, okay? It's a visual template that you can use to really get the project started. And what you start with is in the far right is the goal. So this is the ultimate the outcome. In this case, a tool shed. Let's say I want to build a tool shed. Around the outside ring there is this is where you'd list the benefits. So for example, I wanted to match the design of the house. I wanted to add value to the house. I wanted to organize tools, and I wanted to be able to park in the garage. So that's step 2. Now, if you take a look at this, step 3 is down at the bottom where you list the resources. So this could be human resources. So there's me, there's my boys, there's my dad. That's my human labor that I've got. I got $1,000. I got 4 open weekends. You can see the other stuff that I've got available as resources in order to build this thing. This is people, money, time, space, and expertise. And then if you take a look, there's actually 3 number 4s. There's 3 step 4s because you typically do these all simultaneously. I'm going to start in the middle just for the sake of storytelling it, but I'm going to come up with my stages, tasks, or milestones. In the case of building a tool shed, well, I'm going to design it, then I'm going to build it, and then I'm going to finish and move stuff in. And you can take a look at what's underneath there. So this is really your Gantt chart, right? This is your work breakdown structure if you're into project management. You come up with your time frame. So if you've got those 4 open weekends, well, you got 4 weeks in order to do that, right? And so you'd say, what am I going to do in each one of those 4 weeks? And then along the way, you're going to identify dependencies. So what are dependencies? Dependencies could show up as risks, unknowns, constraints, enablers, metrics. But what's important here is that you frame them as a question. Because remember, our goal at the end is to build momentum. And if somebody says, well, wait a minute, the HOA is not going to let you build that tool shed. If I'm framing that as a question, how do I ensure that the HOA will approve this tool shed? Well, I don't know what's going to happen. You know, we're supposed to have a rainstorm. Well, what are my weather contingencies? The important part here is that you don't want those external dependencies to get in the way of progress. You want to reframe them in such a way that you can look at them as a question to answer, not as a problem or an obstacle that's going to derail your progress. Okay. So while I'm looking for that to share with you all, I actually have a digital version of this that you can type into. What questions, comments do you have now? Because we're at the end. So what else is coming up?
Brian, one other thing that's coming up that I know you've done before, and I think we've done together, as a part of project planning, is also to do a pre-mortem.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who may not be familiar with that, it's giving consideration to what could go wrong before you start the project. So
Yeah.
as opposed to a post-mortem, what went wrong? You know, why did this project die? You're doing it in advance so you can identify what the obstacles may be.
That's an excellent idea, Trent. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, I imagine another way of looking at it is, what are the risks?
Mhm.
What risks should I anticipate?
So what could we see possibly derailing this thing so that we can
Yeah.
get ahead of them? Awesome. Others, thoughts about this?
Yeah, I often ask what are the best and worst case scenarios and which one's more likely to happen and what are we going to do about it as a pre-mortem.
Very cool.
Yeah. Yes, similar to what Don just said, I'll have people, I'll pose a question. What if this project was spectacularly successful? What are all the things that would have happened that would lead to that? And then turn around and ask, what if this project turns out to be a dismal failure? What are all the things that could have happened that would have brought about that? Sometimes that'll surface risks and positive uncertainties that won't arise if you just say, what might go wrong?
Mhm. So I'm going to ask for a little bit of help. If you can see where I am in the Google Doc, I've created a space for other closers, just because I was trying to get the canvas out there. Can you type those ideas in so that you've got them as a record to refer back to? So pre-mortem was one.
I can just add one. When I see that there are people that are really negative, and I like the positive slant that you've put on it, it doesn't always help to show them the positive. So we can always ask, okay, so what can we do to make sure this fails?
What can we do to make sure that this fails?
Yeah.
Cool.
And then put that up there. And then after that, we can have a discussion about it.
What can
But
we
that's only when there's really negative people.
fails if there are negative people? Love it. Thank you. Got it. Okay.
I just want to add something to what Amanda just said, because I love that one. And there's a liberating structure called TRIZ that is like that. And what's also interesting to do is to ask the question too of like, okay, how can we make sure that this project fails? And they get the list together, then do the circles of what are you currently doing right now? So you can sometimes just get out of the way what you can just make, how you can make progress by stopping something.
Thanks. So I've got Triz in there. Thanks for that, Stephanie. Anything else? Any other closers that you all know and you want to add to this list? Okay, just as some parting thoughts, you will have access to, in fact, if you want to, you can just go ahead and download this. If you go to File, and then you can make a copy, you can download it either as a PDF or a Word document, but this is yours to use. Just a reminder of all of the cool stuff that we've got going on with Nova Scribes. I'll drop the link in. Again, a bunch of author talks, Kelvy Bird, Dana Wright, Brandy Agerbeck, Heather Martinez, and Dean Myers is going to be teaching his 5 diagrams on September 22nd. That one is not to be missed. This is one, if you've been dabbling in graphic facilitation, quite honestly, what he's going to share, this is a visual vocabulary of methods. This is pretty much all you need to know. And he covers mind mapping in there in a lot more detail than we did. Okay. So before we close, Henry, we would love to see your graphic recording. Let me go ahead and
Yeah.
spotlight it.
Yes, sir. Well, it was a lot of fun, and as always is the case, it's a balancing act of just finding the nuggets of wisdom. I captured as many as I could, and I can zoom in on a few. So a lot of talk about tacos, so I included that, just a little bit of humor, and then I, just zeroed in on as much as I could, So
It's amazing. Thank you so much, Henry.
you bet.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Next time, my place.